Welcome back to the deep dive. And today, well, you've sent us a really fascinating stack of sources.
hmm
We're diving into a space that it really tries to merge these deep spiritual principles with a very systematic, very practical application.
That's right. It's a framework that takes something like prayer and turns it into a concrete, repeatable plan.
And the main source for this is from Frederica Carrier.
It is. She's known as the SNEAC Infrastructure Pioneer and SNEACful Gifts founder.
That's a mouthful.
It is. The specific work we're digging into is called the SNEACful P.R.A.Y.E.R framework, Rain and Practicality.
Okay, so before we get into the framework itself, we kind of have to unpack some of that terminology.
Yeah.
What is SNEAC infrastructure? It sounds a bit like, corporate jargon for a spiritual idea.
And that's a critical piece of the context. The term infrastructure itself, it sort of suggests an entry point.
A mechanism.
Exactly. A mechanism to move you from one state, let's say the ordinary, into a more structured, higher state.
Extraordinary.
Right. And Carrier's work suggests this is a process of, like, systematic nourishment and application. So it's not just a philosophy.
No, it's positioned as a repeatable system
Yeah.
for business or life.
Precisely. So our mission today is to understand how she defines prayer, not just as a belief, but as this really explicit, structured framework.
P.R.A.Y.E.R, the acronym.
The acronym, yeah.
And we should probably be clear about that acronym right up front because the sources talk about it in two different ways.
They do. There's the overall idea, the mission statement, which is positive release, available, yielding exponential results.
Okay, so that's the big picture.
That's the goal. But then structurally, each letter stands for a step. It provides a sequential path to follow.
And what immediately strikes you when you read this is the author's tone. It's so personal.
Oh, absolutely, and very energetic.
Immensely. She starts with this real gratitude for just the chance to help someone. And she says she approaches this whole systematic thing with chosen joy, wonder, and giggles.
And that mandated cheerfulness, that's not an accident. It's actually a necessary input for the system she's describing.
So you have to start with positive energy for it to even work.
You have to commit to it. That chosen joy is step one, really, before you even get to the acronym.
Okay, so let's unpack the foundational philosophy then, the idea that anchors this whole thing.
Right.
Carrier uses this one single universal metaphor.
Rain.
Rain.
And the rain analogy, it's the main vehicle she uses to make this universal. She picked this visual because it perfectly captures the idea that the underlying principle prayer, or whatever you call it, is always present.
Always available.
Always available.
Yeah.
She writes that rain falls on everyone, no matter what we believe or who we are.
Which is, that's a huge shift in perspective, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you view prayer as this very personalized, inward kind of petition.
It is. She's framing it as a constant universal resource that's there for everybody.
Regardless of background.
And this resource is both positive and practical. It's positive because, rain nourishes.
And practical because it's the active thing that can change the ordinary in our lives.
It literally transforms the landscape. It is not passive at all. It's an agent of visible transformation.
She even takes that analogy a step further. She talks about the necessary variability of it.
The intensity, yeah. That's a really important nuance.
That not all rain is the same.
Exactly. She says that sometimes, life requires a downpour, a constant.
Intense focus, immediate action.
Right. But other times, all you need is a gentle drizzle.
Which suggests more like consistent, small, maintenance-level actions.
And the challenge for you, the user, is knowing which intensity is required at that moment.
That makes sense. If you think about it practically, preparing for a downpour is very different than preparing for a drizzle.
Totally different.
A downpour needs an umbrella, rain boots, maybe you take cover. A drizzle, you just need to be aware of it.
Right. So the analogy immediately puts the responsibility on you to assess the situation and match your preparation to what's needed.
The benefits are there, but your response has to vary.
Exactly. And this is where she makes this startlingly clear link between the external force, the rain, and the internal mechanism, you.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. She connects the universal nature of rain to our physical selves.
She does, with a biological fact.
Yeah, she uses this grounding factoid.
She states the fundamental truth that the human body is made from 65 to 70% water.
Wow.
And by saying that, she links the entire natural cycle, the rain, the nourishment, directly to the composition of the person using the framework.
So it's not just a nice metaphor about nature.
No. She's saying that the universal principle is literally what you're made of.
So if the vast majority of your physical self is water, then the external source, the rain, is basically what congruent with your internal operating system.
That's the argument. That internal congruence sets the entire tone for the first step of the acronym. It argues that since you are primarily water, you're inherently available for the rain to work.
It makes the first step less of a struggle and more just a recognition of what is.
Exactly. Okay, so let's transition from the metaphor, the environment, to the action framework itself.
Let's do it. P.R.A.Y.E.R. Let's dive deep into the letters. And remember, the goal here is transformation from the ordinary to that extra bit. So start us off with P.
P stands for positive.
Yeah.
And this isn't just, a suggestion.
It's a prerequisite.
It's a prerequisite, yeah. If the outcome you want is exponential results, the input can't have any negativity that would dilute that.
So that chosen joy we mentioned earlier.
That's it. It's the essential catalyst. It allows all the other steps to successfully interact with that universal resource, the rain.
But I have to ask, doesn't that risk being superficial? If I'm in a crisis, a downpour, am I just supposed to fake being happy?
And that's the intellectual friction, right?
Yeah.
The framework seems to suggest it's not about ignoring reality. It's about choosing your perspective. Or, more accurately, the release.
Which brings us to R.
Which brings us to R.
R is for release. Now, in a lot of spiritual contexts, that means letting go of control or anxiety. But in a system like this, how do you actively release?
It implies a really intentional action. You have to clear the channels. If you think about the water analogy again, clouds have to release water for it to become rain.
Okay.
So for the individual, the release is a practical inventory. You identify what's holding you back, old thoughts, resentments, limiting beliefs, and you actively discard them.
The clearing step.
It's a clearing step.
Mm-hmm.
And without it, the positive inputs just have nowhere to land. The source suggests it's mostly a mental exercise, a focused letting go.
Okay, so P sets the emotional temperature, R clears the clutter, which leads us to A.
A stands for available. And the language here is really interesting.
Why available? And not something more active like attain or acknowledge.
Right? Availability is a state of being. It's not usually a sharp action.
And if the goal is exponential results, shouldn't we be driving toward them? Why just be available?
Because the resource, the rain, is already falling, universally. The step suggests that once you've done the positive setup with P and the clearing with R, your main job is just to be open.
Ready to receive.
Ready to receive the flow. It implies a conscious presence, an openness to the process. Instead of trying to micromanage it, you're just consciously present.
That makes sense. It's a readiness to pivot when the opportunity shows up. And that readiness brings us to the next letter, Y.
Y is for yielding. Now, like available, yielding can sound passive.
Like resignation.
Exactly. But in this context, it's about compliance, acceptance, and an active surrender to the process she's laid out.
How is that different from just, checking boxes on a list?
Well, it goes deeper. Compliance can be mechanical. Yielding is an active choice to absorb and integrate the process.
Okay.
Think about it. When rain falls, the ground has to yield. It has to soften and open up to absorb the moisture so things can grow. If the ground is concrete, the water just runs off.
And there are no results.
No results. So the framework is asking you to assess your own internal hardness and consciously choose to soften it. To embrace the process, not resist it.
This actually sounds like it takes a lot of effort, even though the words are release and yielding.
It's an active choice at every single turn.
And that brings us to the payoff letters. This is where we see the return on that investment. E and R.
E stands for exponential. This is the multiplier effect.
Mm-hmm.
And it connects directly back to that infrastructure business term.
Right.
The goal isn't linear results. It's not 1 unit of effort equals 1 unit of result.
It's designed for compounding.
Exactly. It's designed to take the positive intent, the release, the availability, the yielding, and compound them into something way bigger than the sum of its parts.
Does the source give any examples of how you would measure an exponential result?
The emphasis is less on, say, strict math and more on the perceived rate of growth and impact.
Okay.
So a linear result might be, you hit a sales goal after making a certain number of calls. An exponential result might be that hitting that goal somehow opens up a partnership that doubles your business overnight, that extra bit.
The multiplier effect.
The framework promises that the process will deliver that.
That makes the whole system highly aspirational. And it leads us right to the final letter, R.
R is results, the tangible outcome, The whole process is geared toward generating verifiable outcomes in your life.
And because it merges the spiritual and the practical, the results have to be real world.
Absolutely. They're expected to manifest in real ways. Better well-being, financial growth, improved relationships, whatever it is.
So we have the universal metaphor of rain, the internal mechanism of water, and the action plan of P.R.A.Y.E.R. What does this all mean when we connect it back to her overarching philosophy?
It means that her ultimate goal is to merge high ideals with daily repeatable tasks. She describes her guiding philosophy as reaching into the heavenlies, the highest ideals, and pulling down the practical.
And she sees them as interconnected, not separate realms.
Exactly. And the P.R.A.Y.E.R framework is the precise mechanism she provides for that transfer, to let you access universal principles and make them tangible.
And the emphasis on action is just relentless. She doesn't just theorize.
No,
She says she believes in the practical and putting it into practice, but she's careful not to strip it of its meaning.
she is. She says this active approach doesn't undermine the foundational principles from which it came. She's trying to systematize spirituality without losing its core.
And we get a bit more context on this when we look at the framework's origins.
We do. The source material mentions that this whole structure, it builds on her prior work.
13 days of SNEACful gifts, simple gratitude.
That's the one.
So this raises a point about the order of operations. What role does gratitude play as the foundation for P.R.A.Y.E.R.?
Well, that earlier gratitude work established the idea that change has to start from an ordinary place.
Okay.
Gratitude, she argues, is the baseline state. It's the required maintenance level of appreciating what you already have.
So once that ordinary foundation is solid,
Then the P.R.A.Y.E.R framework is presented as the catalyst.
so gratitude gets you to neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And P.R.A.Y.E.R is the engine that moves you from neutral into exponential results.
You've got it.
Yeah.
Gratitude is the starting point.
Mm.
It's acknowledging that the rain is falling. P.R.A.Y.E.R is the systematic engine you use to harness that rain and get that extra bit.
It's really interesting. It's a way of refining this intensely personal, sometimes esoteric concept into a repeatable, almost scalable model for growth.
It is.
It views the spiritual act not as this passive, hopeful state, but as a structured, step-by-step process.
Driven by practical action, energized by positive intent. It's an operational equation for moving from ordinary to extraordinary.
Assuming you're willing to commit to the positive input and that active choice of yielding.
That's the catch.
Okay, let's bring this back for everyone listening and recap the essential takeaways. We've unpacked Carrier's really beautiful universal metaphor of rain.
That constantly available resource.
Right. And that striking fact that 65–70% of our bodies are water, making us intrinsically ready for this system.
And then the practical steps hidden inside the P.R.A.Y.E.R acronym.
Remind us of those one more time.
Remember, it requires intentionality at every step. P for positive intent. R for the active release of inhibitors.
A for making yourself available to receive.
Y for actively yielding to the process. And all of that combines for E, exponential R, results.
And as she wraps up her reflection on this, the author promises to commit to the practicality of it all.
She does.
She says her personal plan is to walk it out with an umbrella or not in hand.
Which is such a great line. That commitment signifies that the real test is application.
Regardless of the circumstances.
Right. The umbrella is preparation for the downpour. But not having one, that suggests trust in the process, even when things are tough.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, building on that practical application. If that universal principle, the rain, is constantly falling on everyone, how does committing to a simple, practical acronym like P.R.A.Y.E.R. change how you prepare for the inevitable downpours in your own life?
And what measurable difference will that systematic preparation make for your happy journey?
Something to think about as you start to see where your own commitment to that positive release might lead.
Definitely.
We hope this deep dive gave you some valuable context and maybe challenged your definition of both prayer and structured action. Until next time, keep digging into those sources.